But Animal Crossing is great in that it allows me to feel like I have accomplished something when in reality I have done nothing at all. And I love it. While you were very productively doing your makeup for the numbers of recordings we're doing today, I can tell you how I was using my time was dressing up all of my little animals in the Animal Crossing game, trying to make sure that every one of them has the perfect set of formal wear.
And not just the penguins because they're like preset.
Right, exactly. Yes. And that is part of the challenge. Like they're already in a tuxedo. What is going to look better than that? Not much. Um, and then it's like, what would a bald eagle want to wear camping? What kind of formal wear is best for them? There's a lot of decisions that need to be made. Um, yeah, and so that's what I did to contribute to our work today.
I'm thinking top hat. Maybe I'm just
Ooh,
thinking like bald eagle, Uncle Sam.
you
Top.
know,
Does Uncle Sam wear a top hat? Is that a thing?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I have not gotten into headwear yet. That is another area certainly that I can enter into. So far, it's just suits and dresses and the occasional handheld candy bar because that's what I've been given. I just started this playthrough, so my options are kind of limited, which is part of the challenge. But yeah, that's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so it's like, yeah, I put animals in tuxedos. What did you do today?
Video games allow me to live out my greatest fantasies, such as being assigned a task and completing that task and being rewarded for completing that task.
A neurodivergence dream.
Now, if only we could play video games to pay for my ruinously expensive medication.
Well, on that note, should we make a podcast?
Yeah, let's think about anything other than this. Let's make a podcast.
Great.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Gifted Kid, Messy Adult, and Neurodiversity Podcast, the show where potential went to die. I am one of your hosts, Ellie Michaels. I use she, her.
I am your other host, Coach Jessica Michaels, a neurodiversity coach, speaker, and consultant, and I use she, they.
And today we are talking about yet another failed way to sleep.
Wah, wah.
So we talked about this last time. It was a folly that you pursued, the cognitive shuffle method of falling asleep, where you just try to think of unrelated things and supposedly that makes you tired. Turns out that works maybe for the neurotypicals, not so great for us. And my folly was 4 hours of ancient Jedi lore to sleep to. Now, I am certainly a fan of the Star Wars franchise. I'm not hardcore. I'm more of a Trekkie in that sense. But I like lore, and I like needless esoteric knowledge that isn't even necessarily canon anymore. Because my understanding is Disney threw out a lot of the old stuff. But it turns out that just kept me awake
So,
because I didn't know it.
so let me just to get a handle on this. So the premise is and the video is titled, right? Like 4 hours of whatever to get you to sleep, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
specifically in the title. And the idea is that this isn't just like basic Star Wars content or like Star Wars plot points. It's supposed to be stuff that's so esoteric that it's totally boring, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, because you had me listen to a little of this, and for if you are not a Star Wars person, and even honestly, if you are a Star Wars person, but not really a Star Wars person, it's going to sound like they're just throwing random letters and numbers at you. It'll be TK416, then visited MLQOP, and this is happen. You know what I mean? It
Mm-hmm.
is not supposed to be engaging. And I think for most people, it would not be engaging.
Mhm.
What happened to you?
Um, it was thoroughly engaging, and I listened to all of it. And it was one of those like, how, wait, what? Why is it 4 a.m.? It was just like midnight 30. What are we doing? Oh, crap. One of those, you know?
Oops, I hate that. So, first of all, you are not alone, and I am not alone in all of our sleep troubles. I've got some statistics here. The incidence of sleep problems in ASD patients ranges from 32 to 71.5%, especially
Uh,
insomnia, while an estimated 25 to 50% of people with ADHD report having sleep issues in clinical settings. The incidence of sleep issues is widespread in people with intellectual disabilities, reaching up to 86%. And those are from the National Institute of Health, which I believe still exists as of today. I have not watched the news yet. But I
Give it a
think
day.
yeah, I think that even though it specifically mentions in here ASD and ADHD, I think anecdotally, I don't know many I don't think I know any neurodivergent person who has no sleep issues, honestly. So whether that's, gifted, whether that's dyslexia, dyspraxia, I I I don't think I know anybody who can sleep, even if it's just secondary anxiety from living in a world that is not built for us. I think the majority of us have a significant difficult time sleeping, whether that's falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep, or once wake up in the middle of the night, can you get back to sleep? Often the answer is no. So it isn't just us, which is why I think these kind of, oh, here, this is a quick tip to help you sleep. They look so appealing and why we kind of fall for them every single time because you just want to discover something that actually works. But it seems like this was not the thing.
Yeah, I was reminded of the neurodivergent brain is motivated by novelty. So,
Did I remind you
learning
of
about a
that?
whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know. Oh, look, novelty. That's going
Yeah.
to engage my mind.
That was my first reaction when you told me, when we were discussing this about sleep and how it hadn't worked, is that I said, had you listened to this before? No. So this is all brand new information. And, we know that when you have executive dysfunction, that is one of the things that can motivate an ADHD brain to actually like do things and to pay attention is novelty. Not to mention that our autistic brains often really love context and our gifted brains really love facts. I mean, and it's one of those things where I don't think there are clear lines between, which identity ties into which thing. I think these are just for a lot of neurodivergent people, 4 hours of just straight facts that you've never heard before, regardless of the context, I think might be something that would be more likely keeping them awake and potentially taking notes than falling asleep.
Crap.
Unless you were listening to it for the 10th time.
Well, because that's the thing. Like, I have one or two audiobooks that I tend to listen to when I'm going to sleep because I've heard them a million times and they're boring. But it's also difficult to like want to put on the thing that I've heard a million times and is boring.
Because it's boring.
Oh, oh, I see what I did there.
Yeah. I've been listening to Project Hail Mary over and over. That tends for right now, that has been my sleeping book. And most of the time it's still interesting enough that I will, because that's the magic balance, right? It's got to be interesting enough that you'll pay attention and it'll catch your attention, but not too interesting that it will hold it. It's got to help you, it's just got to help get you over the hump between like thinking about everything else, then I'm keyed into the book, but then the book is kind of boring, so I drift off to sleep. If it's too interesting, or, and then I'm awake and listening to the book, but if it's too boring, I can't get into it and I'll be thinking everything else. I won't be listening to the book. It is tough. So Project Hail Mary for me has been the book, but I've started to notice that when I turned it on now, it's not always giving me what I need. Although I do recommend everybody read that book. Most of the people I know who've read it like it. Um,
Hmm.
so Project Hail Mary is a good recommendation. I used to watch TV before, in the before times when I was single. I would watch the same TV shows over and over and over. The West Wing became a fall asleep show for me, and I think The Wire. But I know light is very bad for you when you're trying to get to sleep, so transitioning to audiobooks was good. Or murder podcasts and shows on YouTube.
Hmm.
So I've been listening to a lot of those to fall asleep. So what are your books that your go-to books for sleeping, even if they haven't been working lately?
Terry Pratchett's The Last Continent. Um, it's his book that's kind of about Australia, but not specifically Australia, just a place that here and there is a little bit Australian. Um, I particularly love that one because there's no bad guy. Like Pratchett does good bad guys, but he also does disturbing bad guys.
Yeah.
Whereas, and like the Last Continent is kind of peak Rincewind, where it's a travel log, and it's just him going from silly situation to silly situation, while we cut back to the wizards roundabout explaining what evolution is and how it works without ever actually explaining that that's what they're talking about. Um, which I'm because the Galapagos Islands are near Australia,
So
I
it's
think.
almost like silly science. It's kind of an alternate explanation for how things came to be in a very entertaining Pratchettian interpretation.
Exactly. And then each of the vignettes that Rincewind is doing is something that's out of like Australian culture, which I kind of know, but I really don't know in any kind of detail. Like, certainly not the way I know American culture, certainly not the way I kind of know English culture, British culture, but I know it enough to be like, oh, this is the part that's like Mad Max. That this is the part about how there actually is a sailboat regatta in a dry lake bed. They have every year. That one year, the lake bed was full and they had to cancel it because when one of the methods of your boat is just having holes in the bottom and everybody just picks it up and runs with it, Flintstone style, you can't do that when the river is full of water. Um,
So
so it's
enough to so that kind of rides that line of like the book pretty well, but it's still interesting because you know enough, but not everything.
mm-hmm,
So, and it's still amusing, but it's starting to get to that point where maybe it's too familiar now, and so it's not keying in for you. Yeah. Yeah,
mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm.
really hard. That's really hard. What's the other book that you typically fall asleep to?
The Hobbit,
No. Mm,
which should probably go without saying, what with naming myself after a deep cut Tolkien character. um I like the silly low stakes of the beginning of The Hobbit, which is, do I have enough cakes for all of these people who suddenly are going to stay for dinner? Then I saw a thing about how do you know how later in The Hobbit, when like after the goblins and whatever, and they're trying to get Beorn's help, but they can't just all show up at his door of like 15 people, like, hey, what's up? Can we crash? So Gandalf walks up with Bilbo, and then they slowly introduce more and more of the dwarves as he tells this story. Gandalf did that to Bilbo at the start. That's why the
yes, he
dwarves
did.
all show up staggered. Like, they've been traveling for days from Ered Luin. They're not going to all of a sudden get separated. Like,
This
almost
is
a
gonna be
hundred years later, I finally noticed a twist.
this is gonna be great for our readers who know these materials The ones who do not, maybe not. But seriously,
Oh, who hasn't read The
at
Hobbit?
this
Come on.
point, well, I mean, or at least watch the movie. And what you have described is in the movies, so I
Hmm,
think
hmm.
that a lot of people will understand. But the point is that it's really hard to find something to sleep to. Now, what happens? This feels like a dangerous question, but what happens if you try nothing, not listening to anything?
I am tortured by my own mind
Yeah,
for hours
yeah.
and hours, which I was for, a large amount of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always presented as my fault. Like, why aren't you asleep? Like, I don't know. Like when I was like 12 and I had to go under for surgery, and the anesthesiologist came back after she, put me on a drip and is like, why are you awake? Like, I don't know. I'm 12. You're a doctor.
Well, and that kind of comes out of when you talk to doctors or when you research sleep, all, a good portion of the advice is about your sleep hygiene. Got to go to bed at the same time and make sure your room's dark and make sure your room's cool. Well, our room is darn near cold,
Mm-hmm.
I think, so got that. It's dark. Uh, you hear these things over and over, and they are very much these are the conditions that you need to set. And if you are not sleeping, then it must be because you haven't set one of these conditions, one of these basic pieces of information that have been available for decades. You must not be doing it right. But I don't think with the how prevalent it is for people to have sleep problems that are neurodivergent, I have a really difficult time thinking that that is it because often that's what you hear from people is my mind just races or my brain just keeps going or I just have to replay that the time that I locked my keys out of my car and my ex-boyfriend was there and it turns out my front window was all the way open, so that's all I needed to do was reach in and grab them, but I didn't think of that. Like I feel like there is some mechanism that is keeping us all from sleeping. um but in this case, maybe, do you think that if you watch this video like 10 more times, then it would move into the category of interesting enough to hold my attention, but not so interesting that I am going to stay awake? Or is the minutia such that you think that it it won't give you that familiarity that you need?
I don't like it enough and I don't care enough.
Yeah, that's tough.
Um, I like Star Wars and it's kind of interesting, but it's also not my bag. It's not my favorite. I don't think it really has a place in my heart. It's got a place in my ribs, maybe like a
Hmm.
timeshare, but really not a place
Yeah.
in my heart per se. Like I had friends who were super gung ho, like the people who were utterly crushed when Disney bought Star Wars and was like, all right, all of the canon from the books is gone now. And people were like, my life is ruined. Like, first of all, you need a hobby, another hobby.
A different hobby.
Second of all, those books still exist. Like,
Hmm. Yeah. So this one we may just have to chuck into the no good, the failed method pile. I don't know that there's any salvaging of this particular 4-hour video.
it's ironic is that this kind of stuff is exhausting. Trying to figure out how to sleep, constantly needing to fight for it. It's utterly exhausting. And this has been a thing for my entire life, and I hate it. I hate it with every ounce of my being. And I try really hard not to hate things.
We'll keep trying.
Okay.
Maybe somebody out there in our fantastic listening audience have some suggestions. So we'd love to hear them if you could throw them in a YouTube comment or email us and let us know. What are your sleep hacks or sleep tricks? Even if they have not been successful for you, maybe they'll be successful for someone else. So let us know what you have heard or what you have tried, and we'll see. Maybe we'll give them a try ourselves and report back.
Yeah, go ahead and email that to giftedkidmessyadult@gmail.com. And, even if you have your own version of 4 hours of ancient Jedi lore that kept you awake until the wee hours, yeah, make a good follow up podcast. We can commiserate on our pain.
While we yawn.
Uh, well, that's about all I can take for this episode of Gifted Kid Messy Adult. If you'd like to be wildly depressed, uh, if you'd like to support the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Just where can people find out more about you?
People can find out about me at coachjessicamichaels.com. They can find out about having me come speak to your organization about neurodiversity. Neurodiversity Recognition Week is coming up in March, so get your bookings in now. And then I would like to make a personal plea that Ellie can't edit out of the podcast. So we have once again encountered some unfortunately high medical bills in that are necessary to keep our lovely Ellie upright and functioning. So we do have a GoFundMe link that we will put in the show notes, or you can go on GoFundMe and search Jessica and Ellie's Fight for Health. That would be lovely if you can donate, or if you could forward that to your network or post it somewhere would be great. And we know that that is not something that a lot of people can do. So if maybe you know a neurodivergent person, you could share our podcast, or if there's somebody who's neurotypical that you would love to have understand more about neurotypical minds, maybe forward them the podcast, and all of that helps too, and helps us, defeat the American healthcare system and keep Ellie upright. So she doesn't like to ask, but I will ask on her behalf.
Well, until next time, take care of each other out there.
Bye.